Corla, I welcome the opportunity to speak on this important piece of legislation, and I can assure the Minister and the Government that Fianna Fáil will be supporting it. I think it's important to point out that prior to the Court of Appeal being established in October 2014, litigants had to wait approximately 4 years for their appeals to be heard in the Supreme Court. And that was an unconscionable delay for people who were entitled to have an appeal heard promptly, and yet they had to wait 4 years. The purpose of establishing a Court of Appeal was so that the process of appeals could be determined much more quickly. The Court of Appeal has been effective in seeking to achieve that objective. And in fact, on the criminal side of the Court of Appeal, you will get an appeal heard within this year if you put an appeal in now. However, where there is a significant backlog is in respect of civil appeals before the Court of Appeal. At present, if you want to appeal a civil action to the Court of Appeal, the earliest date you'll get is May 2021, which is in effect a wait of 2 years or just over 2 years. So it makes very much sense that we try to add more resources to the Court of Appeal. At present, there are 10 judges on the court. Under the legislation, we will have 6 more to bring it up to 16 judges. As has been stated by the Minister, the effect of that is that we'll be able to have 2 divisions of the Civil Court of Appeal hearing cases, and we'll also be able to have the Criminal Court of Appeal, 3 judges there hearing criminal appeals. I think the legislation also underlines another very important point that we will have to deal with and that the Government will have to deal with in due course, and that is the resourcing of the judiciary. We have 40 High Court judges at present. It's not enough. We need High Court judges, more of them involved. Talk to any litigant who's waiting to get their case on in the High Court, and it's unfortunately the case in civil actions that many of them will not get on the first time their case is listed for hearing, they won't get on the second time their case is listed for hearing, and if they're lucky they may get on the third occasion. The reason why there is such a delay is because of the lack of judges being available. I sometimes compare the resources that people in this House have to members of the judiciary. If you're a TD here, you have the entitlement, appropriately, to hire 2 people, and you need that as a TD. If you're a minister, I think you can hire up to maybe 7 people, and you probably need that as a minister, although you do have the department behind you with all the hundreds of people who work within that. If you're a High Court judge, you're lucky if you can get yourself 1 judicial researcher who has to do everything for you. And when you think of the responsibilities that fall on High Court judges, they have to listen to all the evidence in the cases, and then they have to go off after the case is ended, and they have to produce a considered and correct High Court judgment. And, you know, they have to get it right. And the reason they have to get it right is because Ireland is a common law system, and the system of law in this country depends to a large extent on a judge-made law. We have obviously huge amounts of law going through this House, but every piece of legislation that we put through this House inevitably ends up before the courts, where a judge is required to interpret it and to give written decisions in respect of it. So I think we need to look at the level of resources we're going to allocate to the judiciary in this country. It's an important limb of government. There are 3 limbs of government in this country: the executive, the legislature and the judiciary, and it's very much the case that the one that is resourced the least is the judiciary, and I think that's something that the Minister needs to look at. Obviously, if you look at the very good work that the Court of Appeal has done, you have to go to the Court Services Annual Report. The report for 2017 was published last year. The Minister has referred to some of the statistics within it, but when you read the report, you'll see that a considerable amount of work and appeals have been completed by the Court of Appeal. It may be the case that because of the Court of Appeal and because of its efficiency, more appeals are being taken than would be the case if the Supreme Court was just there. It's certainly the case that in respect of interlocutory matters, appeals in respect of them are being taken more frequently than would have been the case prior to the establishment of the Court of Appeal. But we need to recognise, and I've said this repeatedly, the resourcing of the Court of Appeal is not about the convenience of judges, it's not for the convenience of lawyers, it's so as to enable citizens who come before our courts to get justice before the courts. And if there isn't a facility or a capacity within the court system to deal with actions which people bring before the courts, well then justice isn't being properly served. This piece of legislation is only about the Court of Appeal. We're increasing the number of judges from 10 to 16. As I said previously, we need to look at other courts, particularly the High Court. At present, we have 40 High Court judges. But when you look at the per capita number of, or the number of judges per capita in Ireland, you can see that we are in a very low position. I know that research was done in respect of the year 2015, and it showed that Ireland was 77th out of 94 countries in terms of the number of judges we had per capita. At that stage, the Council of Europe average was 21 judges per 100,000 people, but in Ireland at that time it was only 3 per 100,000 people. For instance, in Norway it was 11 per 100,000 people, and in Portugal it's 19 per 100,000 people. So the government needs to look at further resourcing not just the High Court, but the Circuit Court and the District Court. As I said to you, it's not about the convenience of lawyers, it's about individuals being able to have access to the courts. If we have more judges there and we put more resources into it, going to court will not be as stressful and as consequential a decision if people can go to court, have their case heard quickly and have it disposed of quickly and then get an appeal dealt with. It shouldn't be the case that it takes years for you to gain access to justice in this country. I also think that the inevitable delay and prolonging the whole process of a court case has the effect of increasing costs in respect of it. If you can have a case dealt with quickly, there will be more competition and the cost of the case will decline also. So, as I say, I welcome the legislation. Fianna Fáil will be supporting it. I think we need greater resources in the Court of Appeal, but I also think the government needs to look more at resourcing other aspects of the judiciary. Finally, just today we had the estimates for the Justice vote. Minister Flanagan was in before the committee. It was outlined that next year the estimate for the Judicial Council is €250,000. That's not sufficient in order to deal with a statutory body that's proposing to deal with the training of judges, that's proposing to deal with disciplinary matters in respect to judges, and that's proposing that the judges will be asked to produce guidelines, not just in respect of personal injuries, but also in respect of criminal matters. So once again, it needs to stop being treated as the Cinderella of the three-limbed part of government. It needs further resources, and it's for the sake of the citizens that we should all be seeking further resources for the judiciary.
Thank you.